Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to week 8 of Freedom is the Future. I was actually doing attendance or like the tabs earlier. I can't believe we're already at week 8. So we have this class and then next week's class that is more like information based. And then again, reminder that our last class is going to be you all sharing out. So there's no pressure to do work outside of the class. On the last class on week 10, I'm gonna give you guys time. There's 6 questions that we want everyone to think through, and we're gonna give you all time to think through them in the class. It does not have to be a full presentation. It's literally just sharing out. But if you all like to have more time to process, I know like sometimes I like to have questions in advance. They are all on the Google Classroom under the general documents, where you could just look at the questions that we're going to ask you all to answer and to share out, and you can have time to think about them before. So just a reminder that that's the plan for week 10. So not next week, but the one after that. I want to get us right into today's conversation and our guest speakers. I do want to say, I know that I mentioned that it was going to be a panel of 3 speakers. Unfortunately, our third panelist was not able to join us because of nonprofit life and things that she had to take care of, but I know we're still going to have a great conversation. So just again, a reminder of where we're at in our little caterpillar of freedom. We are here, we're at week 8, Solidarity panel. Next week, we're going to be looking at symbols of resistance. And then again, week 10 will end with what can we do now, with a lot of personal reflection from all of you. So today's agenda is really, we're just going to welcome our guest speakers. I've prepared some questions for them just to start off our conversation, and then we can get into open Q&A and just an open conversation discussion and hear from all of you. And then I already kind of reminded everyone of our plan for the last class, but if we need to revisit that, then we can do that also. Okay, so I'm very excited to, I'm just going to share my screen just for the introductions, then I'll stop, but to share our first guest speaker for today, who's Kylie Guy. Kylie is a citizen of the Navajo Nation. She is a member of the Red Nation and program director of Red Media Press. And Corey Peterson Smith, who is the Michael Ratner Middle East Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. He researches the U.S. empire, borders, and migration. Corey graduated from the Clark University Graduate School of Geography in Massachusetts after completing a dissertation that focused on militarization and sovereignty. He is one of the co-authors and organizers of the 2015 Black Solidarity with Palestine Statement, which was signed by over 1,000 Black activists, artists, and scholars. So I think both guest speakers do not need more of introductions or welcome, but if you all can help me welcome them. And then I do have these 6 questions out here just for everyone to be able to follow, but I want to stop sharing just so we can all see each other and just take some moments to say hi to our guest speakers. And then I will put the questions in the chat in case people need to follow them as we're asking them. But Corey and Kylie, thank you both for joining us. I know Corey's done this with us couple of years now. This is Kylie's first time joining us for this class. This is usually, I was telling everyone last week, this is usually everyone's favorite class and session from this 10-week course. So thank you both for being with us. If you want to add anything to the introductions that I gave, please do so now.
I'll just say I'm so honored and psyched to be here again. And this has been like, since I've gotten to do this a couple times, it ends up being like a highlight for my year too. So gratitude, and also just to say that, you know, I know that this is a really, really difficult time in Palestine right now. And arguably could have said that, you know, at any point in the past century, but this feels, I know this is just brutal, you know what I mean? So just, yeah, thinking about you all, your families and your hearts, and really grateful to be here with you all, and know that as hard things are right now, you know, every day is a day closer to a free Palestine. So gratitude.
Thanks,
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah, I just wanna echo the gratitude that Corey just expressed. And I am also just really looking forward to this discussion and hopefully just hearing back from you all, everybody here, like hearing your perspectives and yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Of course, thank you both. And thanks, Corey, for starting us off with kind of that grounding, because it has been, I think, especially the last couple of weeks, like you said, I mean, obviously for many communities and for Palestine for decades, but especially in the last couple of weeks, things have just felt very heavy. So thank you for naming that. And I want to make sure that, or I want to invite everyone that, like, if what has happened in the last couple of weeks is stuff that we want to talk about and unpack in this space, we're always open to do that. And I know the point is solidarity, but I think, I mean, this is how solidarity comes, is from vulnerable conversations too. So at any point, the questions that I have prepared are just to help guide us through and give conversation, but I really would love everyone to just cut me off at any point and ask a question, and just use the raise hand feature, and you can turn everyone's mics on also. So I guess to start us off with Think About Solidarity, and just again as a reminder for everyone, is last week we went through kind of a deeper understanding of different communities that have been in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. What are some of the main themes that have brought together Black community, Indigenous communities, and Latinx communities specifically with the Palestinian struggle, and unpacking themes of militarization, policing, settler colonialism, erasure of land, dispossession of land, erasure of identity. We talked about borders and identification, and how all of those are used, and detention, and how all of those are used as a tool of oppression, and how we can how communities converge their struggles because of these larger systems. So we kind of had that background. That sounds like a lot now that I'm saying it. Just quick background last week. And so we can also unpack that more. We kind of just went through like a very quick overview, but if any of you want to get a little deeper into any of those themes, we can also do that. But to start us off, from that conversation from last week, the first question I want to ask you both is just if you could share how you define solidarity and what it means and looks like to you, because that was something that we started off last week talking about also. And I'll put it in the chat.
I can answer first. Okay. Well, I think over the years, my definition, or the way that I view solidarity, has changed. It's almost like adapted to the like political landscape, and just like how things change under capitalism. So I think right now, whenever I think of solidarity, I sort of think of like linked arms, and it's like you're linking arms with someone who may not have like the same background as you, or like the same upbringing, or same like ideologies, but you have like a shared goal, and like a shared vision, a shared I guess like vision for what you want to achieve. And so by linking arms, you're stronger, and you are able to have just like a support system. And I think also what I've learned, especially within like Indigenous movements, we're really quick to want the like immediate gratification. Like we want the immediate like victory. But I think sometimes we sideline just like basic forms of solidarity, like respect, or treating each other with dignity, respecting each other's boundaries, because sometimes like when I am speaking with people from different nations, like outside of like Dene nations, I have to remember like, okay, they have different protocols than I do, like within my community. So I have to be like conscious and intentional with that. And then I think just like being able to communicate with people without needing to prove that you're right or needing to prove something. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's better to just be genuine and transparent with where you are, whether if you're like in a collective or if you're learning something for the first time, because I feel like that also really helps too, and people are more open to working with you, and then speaking with you about their struggles and what they've learned and their histories. So I think that's something that's really important, is just practicing those basic forms of respect and just like listening to people. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kylie. I similarly feel like the question of what solidarity is changes for me, both as the world changes and kind of demands different solidarity, but also as I learn more that this conversation that I've gotten to be part of for a few years now is kind of like this nice check-in of like, oh, what does solidarity mean to me this year? So I really appreciate it. And on the most basic level, I just think of solidarity as unity and struggle. You know what I mean? Like we're in this together. We should stick together. On a deeper level, I think it's a recognition that we are bound together, by these systems that extend all over the world, actually, and so whether we know it or not, whether we think about it or not, we're entangled in this thing. And that said, we're not all entangled in the same way. And I think that like trips people up with solidarity. You know what I mean? Like solidarity, I know the question is, what does solidarity mean? Not just like what it doesn't mean. I don't think solidarity is like sameness. You know what I mean? Like the oppression of Black people in the US is not the same as the oppression of Palestinians in Palestine or Palestinians in the US. There are similarities, and that, we could talk about why that is. But yeah, like it doesn't mean looking for kind of congruence. I think about like peoples who are indigenous to this place, that we call North America, for whom like fishing rights are important. That's part of liberation. That's not I don't need fishing rights. Like that's not liberation for me. You know what I mean? Religious rights are not, I'm not part of a marginalized religious group. Language rights are not important for me. I speak the dominant language of this place, right? And then there are things that are specific to the oppression of my community that other people don't experience, but we're also all bound together. So I think that it's recognizing that kind of entanglement while also recognizing what is distinct about how we're kind of entangled, what our liberations look like. And for that, I think we have to get to what Kylie was talking about, which like the listening piece. Like that's why it matters, is because it's a commitment to really understanding, on someone else's terms, their struggle. And for that, I take guidance from the Black revolutionary Assata Shakur. She wrote an autobiography it's like my favorite book. And in it, she talks about what it meant she talks about actually the experience of coming into solidarity with people indigenous to, where she lived in New York City and elsewhere in this place. And she starts talking to indigenous activists and realizes like, oh, wait, what I think I know about these people is actually informed by what I learned in school. it's informed by what I saw at the Museum of Natural History. And I actually have to learn from these people what their history is and who their heroes are. So I think it's that. I think that is solidarity is it's a commitment. You know, like committing to shared liberation means committing to really trying to understand each other's struggles, you know, on their own terms.
Yeah, thank you both for starting this off that way, because I think oftentimes we get sometimes stuck in like trying to have it like a theoretical way that we're supposed to do stuff, or just like this is what it's supposed to be and this is how I'm supposed to be. And so I have to, you know, we put ourselves in a box even when trying to work in solidarity with people. And both of your answers just kind of pointed to more of like the practice of just being with people and listening to people, and you don't have to like and I'm talking from a personal, I think I used to think when I was a couple years ago, I would engage more in like, okay, we have to, what are we doing? And we have to do. And like now it's like, you know, we can just sit and be and talk, and that in itself creates the what we need to do. And so those are very good reminders. Does anyone have questions or I'm going to check in between each question, because I don't want to be asking all the questions at this point or on this point specifically for either of our speakers. Okay. Again, please just like raise hands and put stuff in the chat as you do. I think, so I felt like you both were maybe starting to get at this, Kylie maybe a little more towards the end, but the next question I wanted to ask is about how allyship can and has been performative, at least from my experience. It has felt performative in the last couple of years for sure. And so I guess I want to ask if there's any advice that you have on how to tell the difference, how we can better tell the difference between genuine allyship, or whatever word we want to, I don't like that word, you know, accomplice, whatever word we want to use, or performative allyship. And then also how to make sure, like how do we check ourselves to make sure that we aren't engaging in performative allyship, because it's also a learning process. And so sometimes we might not, you know, we're all learning and growing. And so how can we check ourselves so that not to, you know, push us away and feel like we can't do it, but like be able to learn and move forward in genuine solidarity. And I guess you all can answer that from personal experiences or just things that you've used.
I think, unfortunately, there isn't a nice way to go about it. There isn't a nice way to go about it. So I think in my experience, I don't know, it's complicated, but I think having just like open conversations about what you're willing to tolerate and not tolerate is something that like a collective or like a class like this should have amongst themselves. Like what is behavior that you're not going to let slide, you know, and what are you going to address? And I think in terms of like distinguishing like what's performative, I think it's good to get like insight or like an understanding of one's commitment versus their interest. Because I find that there's a lot of people who are interested in like a struggle, but it only goes so far. Like maybe sometimes it has to do with like their capacity, or they only want to participate in like protests or rallies or attending workshops, but that's like as far as it goes, you know. Sometimes I think people get their education, their political education and engagement from social media, and I think sometimes that feeds a lot of like performativity. So sometimes it's just that people, they don't know how to engage, but they're getting it, they're seeing it elsewhere, you know, as like a popular form, like on social media. So I think sometimes if you get an idea of like their commitment versus interests, and sometimes it's also good to just like distribute labor to them, or like suggest like, I know I saw you're interested in photography, or you mentioned that yesterday, would you mind taking pictures of our rally, or we're having this workshop, would you mind taking media here? I find that that helps a lot. And sometimes people decide on their own, like, this isn't what I'm looking for, I'd rather just support from afar, or like, yeah. But I think ultimately it's at the discretion of oppressed and colonized peoples to make those decisions for themselves. Like ultimately, like what is their method for addressing performativity, and yeah, like where do you want to draw those lines?
Word. Just want to shout out the children. um, just put mine to bed. So, I this is such a good question, and I'm gonna try to be brief because there's so much to say about it. But I so one thing for me that's been helpful is just like and important is like actually recognizing that liberation is possible, and that it's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like Palestine's going to be free. I don't have any doubts about that. And that's, it's whatever. There's a lot of like a lot is invested to make us doubt that. So whatever. There's times when where we might question whether oppression can end. That's okay. But I think fundamentally, like, we should recognize that people who are today marginalized and oppressed are actually have the capacity to liberate themselves, and will be free. And it's a question of when and how, but it's going to happen. And that, when I think about the work that I try to do regarding my relationship to the Palestinian freedom struggle, I start from that place. Palestine's going to be free. So what are we doing? So what are we doing today? So what does it look like today? You know what I mean? On that road. Otherwise, without the kind of like groundedness in like, this is actually going to happen, I think that it can be easy to like veer into a kind of performative thing. You know what I mean? But it's like, we're not, this isn't a game, you know what I mean? Like we're talking about people's freedom. So, all right, so what are we doing? So what does it look like, right? And then yeah, it's recognizing that we, again, because we're all kind of bound together, we all have some role to play in that. And I think it's like really thinking about what that role is. I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of actually for the past several months, like I've been trying to do some work with Iranian folks actually about, there's this incredible freedom struggle happening in Iran right now. And led by women, you know what I mean? It's a women's abolitionist, it's a feminist abolitionist struggle. It's incredible. And I think there's way too little solidarity in the US about it. And one of the things that I've kind of realized in a new way is that I think that American or people in the US, and this includes, us activists, whatever, I think it'd be very difficult for us to see ourselves in a story where we are not the protagonist. You know what I mean? Like, we here are not going to free women in Iran. Iranian women are doing an amazing job of that, but we have some role in the story as residents of the state that is, had an embargo on their country for 40 years, you know what I mean? Like, so what is that place? what is that role? And I think that we have to think about that, but in a way that's like, we're not the main characters in this story. And then the last thing on that piece is just, this gets at what Kylie was speaking to, I think, like on a kind of, I don't know, on an interpersonal level or whatever, but I think should be built into our organizing too, is like, I just think it really matters to build genuine relationships with the people, with people who are from communities with whom you're in solidarity, when possible. I came into solidarity with Palestine in a small city where I knew 0 Palestinians, you know what I mean? But when possible, you know what I mean? Like, you need people who can be like, what you said wasn't quite right, or like, I wouldn't put it like that, or whatever. And that's how we learn, right? I mean, what a blessing to have those relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is being okay taking that also, right? Like, you have to be open to take that. And part of it is, if you have a good interpersonal relationship with people, then you're not gonna, hopefully not like take an attacking way or get defensive, but you're just gonna take it like, well, this is because you also care about me and how I engage in this work. And it's not just to, make someone feel bad or guilty. And I think that trust is important. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, we don't always have that. And Kylie, I really appreciated what you said about commitment versus interest. I think being able to articulate it in that way is really helpful, because I think at some points, like, we've thought about it, but naming it in that way helps make it more concrete. So it's easier to be able to, like you're saying, like, okay, well, how do you want to come in? Where do you want to come in? And even giving people that option sometimes is helpful. And we were talking about this in one of our, we have an advocacy and community engagement team. And so Rania and Jason, I was thinking about how we were talking about, like, you can't, if figuring out how much you can come in, and that actually just being able to name that can help. Because if you're only able to come in, like we were talking about the difference between, activism and organizing, and coming in once a year for the holidays to give back to the community versus engaging in mutual aid year round. And like, we don't want to say that you shouldn't come in that once a year, because obviously that's helpful, but then just like not coming in with this kind of like savior complex. Either way, shouldn't have a savior complex, but kind of just trying to distinguish the differences. And we said at the end, like, if that is the only way you come in, naming it and not taking more credit than just that way that you're able to engage. So I was thinking about that when you shared that. I have thoughts about some of what you said, Corey, also just before the interpersonal relationship part, but I think I want to get back to it in one of the other questions, just about, I'm sitting personally with a lot of letting go of a lot of pessimism, because sometimes I just get very like drained and in my own head of like, what are we, what is the point of everything that we're doing? And so you kind of grounding it with, it is going to be free, or we are going to be liberated. And what does that look like today is, I want to be able to embody that more. So I'm going to sit with that a little. I want to check if anyone else has thoughts or reflections or questions about this question specifically. Okay, I'm going to read Lemia's question from the chat. So question in relation to these first two questions would be, where do you guys think someone who is new to advocacy and politics starts? Are there any books, authors, videos, etc., that you would recommend so they can have a footing when entering this type of work? I feel like a lot of people tend to be more performative at times because they don't know where to start in order to grasp all of the information. Yeah, that's a really great question, Lemia. Thank you.
I would say that, well, okay, because here's the thing is like, I think sometimes it might be a mistake to go in with like perfect politics. Because then it's like you kind of rob yourself with the opportunity to learn with other people. When I joined the Red Nation in 2018, I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was like, I wanted to be involved with Red Nation. And I was like, admittedly, I was really liberal. I was like, I kind of just had like a surface understanding of settler colonialism, capitalism, and like feminism. But I knew the Red Nation was, they had the politics that I was wanting to learn. And so I think if you're wanting to join an organization or a collective, I think a good place to start is just asking about their political education and what articles they would recommend. And then just talking to some of their members about, you know, where they started, or if they have anybody that you could speak to, or, you know, just like discuss the articles that they're requiring of you to read. I think studying with a group of people is really beneficial because you absorb different perspectives, and sometimes other people will see an issue, or they'll kind of like provide a different angle of analysis that you didn't know you needed. So I think that's like a good place, because I often think that like reading on your own, or like studying, developing these analysis on your own, like in isolation, it isn't very beneficial. Because then like we said earlier, it's good to have to be receptive to criticisms, or just open to speaking to people. In a way, it's kind of like a sacrifice if you're an introvert, because you're just like, oh God, I have to like give up a little bit of like my comfort. But it's good. It's a good way to start.
I think this is such a beautiful and important question, because it's not only about where one begins, but it's a recognition that everybody begins somewhere, you know. And I think that it's important. I mean, you know, yeah, we all like, I don't know. I don't, none of us started as like revolutionary. And man, especially like residing in this place called the United States. I mean, this is like, I feel like the US is just an experiment in how to make people as alienated from each other, isolated from each other, you know, invested in our own individual well-being, and how to just like turn on your neighbor. You know what I mean? Like that's like the past like 3 centuries or whatever, 5 centuries, you know, like that's this whole project. So it's really hard to you know, live here and figure out how to be in solidarity. I'll just drop, you know, I mentioned Assata by Assata Shakur, and then the other book I'll put in was Leonard Peltier's memoir, Prison Writing: My Life is by Sundance. Those were like the two books I read when I was kind of first getting political, and I just keep going back to both of them. They were so life-changing, and one of the things that's really beautiful, I think that well, they're both instructive in different ways. They both are written by people who are actually narrating their experience of becoming political and becoming radical. And so that's really it's really helpful. But I just want to, I can't agree enough with the idea that a lot of people kind of veer into the performative thing when they don't know what else to do. You know, you want to do something, and again, this society is all about performance. So I think that we actually have to, part of what we're doing here, what all of us are doing, is crafting a culture that invites new people and then challenges all of us to grow. You know what I mean? And it's a different vibe. So yeah, patience with each other for sure.
Thank you both for those answers. I haven't heard of the prison writing book, so I'm excited to check that out. And I like what we're talking about just you don't have to come in knowing everything. And you're right. I think that sometimes leads to performance and leads to like more a savior complex. And like so, we're all kind of learning and growing, but a lot of times when you come in already reading about something, you think you have the answer more than the communities who are actually working on it. Because that's what we've been conditioned to think, right? That like books and intellect and texts give you a higher status, right? And there's like, I'm thinking a lot of education and stuff too, but I think that's an important reminder of you can just start with communities and ask them without obviously, I mean, it's always the balance of like not adding extra labor, but also asking what's already out there, what's already available, and being in conversation with people. So thank you, Lamia, for that question. Anyone else have questions before? Tanya, I saw you put in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to read it or if it was a question or share.
I guess thank you both again. I always love hearing from you both. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us tonight. I think, Corey, your point really resonated with me. Like Abir was saying, is I think particularly recently, it's very easy to get like hopeless or kind of say, not what's the point, because obviously there's always a point, but just feel like doomsday is the end goal. And I think the idea of keeping liberation in mind is a very, very integral part to this struggle. So what I was saying is, do you have like tips in order how to continue to foster that? Because even within the Palestinian communities, you hear a lot of times when they say, Palestine won't be free until X happens or Y happens. And then it's kind of like a very, like sit back and wait until X and Y happens. And until X and Y happens, you'll never see liberation. And I just feel like it's a negative energy coming towards the liberation. So if there's any like advice in terms of how to keep that going, especially during these difficult times. And like what I kind of tell myself sometimes is it's only, what they say, it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And maybe this is the worst before it gets better. Because this is definitely the worst it's been in a very long time. And so, yeah, so just any general advice in terms of like internally, how do we foster that? And then externally, like with people, other, either Palestinians or other people doing the solidarity work, allies, like how do we continue to foster and really hold on to that full belief that liberation is going to happen?
Can I say just like okay, so something comes to mind, which is, all right, there's this like anarchist art professor I once saw like doing this lecture, and he talked about social change in like one of the most clear and compelling ways I ever heard, where he was talking about how he used to live in Berlin in the 80s, which is when the Berlin Wall was up. And he said that all the artists lived next to the wall because it was the ugliest part of the city. It was a big wall there. And it meant the rent was cheap. That was the artist neighborhood. And he was like, we just assumed we would always live there because we assumed that the rent would always be cheap because we assumed that that wall would always be there. We never, ever imagined the wall coming down. It's like, and then one day it came down and we were like shocked and we didn't see it coming. And he said, the reason we didn't see it coming is because we were looking at the wall. We weren't looking at all the things happening around the wall. And it was so helpful because like the wall coming down was the last part of a series of events. You know what I mean? But all this other activity is bubbling up in society that culminates in the wall coming down. And so I'm just thinking about the past like decade in the US. Like, I mean, so part of this is just like a plug. I mean, we commit to, our causes, and part of it is a plug to like, I mean, and really it is the importance of solidarity and like committing to various causes, because when I think about like the struggle for Palestine, like the sort of what that looks like in this place called the US, like what Black Lives Matter has done for that struggle here, and what the recent struggles for Indigenous liberation have done, like what Standing Rock did for Palestine, you know what I mean? Like, it's enormous. Like all of a sudden, many people in this country were like, oh, sovereignty, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, or like with Black Lives Matter, it's like, what was it? It was 2 years ago in May that, you know, Israel was just going wild. They went hard on Sheikh Jarrah and a bunch of neighborhoods in Jerusalem. You know, attacked people at Al-Aqsa Mosque again, ended up, you know, bombing Gaza again. You know what I mean? And the thing is, it was 2021, and that was after the Black Lives Matter uprisings in 2020 here, right? And so I think all these people, which were like the biggest protests in US history or whatever. So all these people, who many of whom probably hadn't thought much about the cops, they participate in these huge uprisings, and they see, you know, all the cops in their local cities cracking down on protest. And then a few months later, they see Israeli police doing that in Jerusalem. And they're like, oh, that's what I saw in Philly. That's what I saw in Brooklyn. Like, they see it in a different way. So that was like obviously, you know, folks in Palestine are, you know, like doing their thing, resisting. And there's all this other stuff happening too that we can't count. So that's why, sorry, I hope that makes sense to go to your question, because it's like, it can feel hopeless, but hope comes from these unexpected like, nobody in the Palestine movement wasn't like, let's plan a Black Lives Matter uprising. That happened totally distinct from the struggle for Palestine and had a massive impact, right? So yeah, just like being open to what all's going on.
Yeah, and just I think that's a great way to approach it, because it's sometimes I'm like, this is the best year for Palestine, and other times like, this is the worst year for Palestine. And I think, you know, balancing that too, and just keeping in mind that, oh, like in the end, again, the idea is that liberation is going to happen one way or the other. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I want to, I really also, I feel like me and Rihanna may both needed to hear the same thing, because in putting what you just shared in context of what is happening right now, especially in Nablus, that's a, you know, direct reaction to the Lions Den, right? Like this really inspiring new grassroots movement of Palestinian youth who are very like unapologetically resisting. And so, and I think I'm thinking of like Frantz Fanon's logic of the fear of the oppressor, right? And that what they do is actually a reflection of their own fears, because because there's this new inspiring like youth that are saying, we're still going to resist and this is our city. And so they need to come down on, I mean, there's a lot more, right? There's like the elections and Netanyahu feeling like he has to prove himself because he's somehow not the most like far right. And then even thinking of IRA, like a lot of, the last couple of years of Palestine really being framed more in a social justice conversations. Now all of a sudden we have this IRA definition that is trying to silence Palestinian talking about Palestine, or fear mongering. So, or what happened in Qatar in the World Cup, and like seeing a lot of, you know, so yeah, I think thinking of it, what you just mentioned, and thinking of it that way is really helpful. Kylie, I don't know if you want to respond to that too, and then Alicia, we can go to your question. Okay, Alicia, go ahead.
I don't really have a question, just like a comment on like what's happening in Nablus right now, because with like Ramadan coming up, I know like a lot of people are saying that it's common that like the IDF like want, or the IOF I should say, are like their goal during times like these is to break the Palestinian spirit. And like even for people who are Palestinian Christians in Bethlehem, they weren't even allowed to celebrate Christmas. So it's kind of this idea that they want to continue not only showing this, but also like breaking the spirit of like a lot of Palestinians in their times of like worship, or like even last year how we saw Al-Aqsa. So I think that's just really like telling of how far they will go to like, you know, really just destroy like the Palestinian spirit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Alicia. And I think that, you bring up really important points of part of resistance is keeping that spirit alive. And I think one of the things I've learned the most from Palestinians and Palestinian struggle is the resilience. And like that in itself is such a burden for the oppressor in a good way, right? So thanks, Alicia. Brian?
Hi, folks. Yeah, first off, thanks for being here. Really enjoying the conversation. So, it was mentioned before about, for example, say Iranian women, are gonna liberate themselves. Outsiders don't liberate them. Um, One thing that I find with a solidarity with oppressed, marginalized, colonized people is people setting terms for what they'll accept as far as theories of change and forms of resistance and things like that. And both groups represented here in the Zoom with our guests and Palestinians share that, in that people try to set the terms. What's acceptable forms of protest, what's acceptable forms of resistance. So I think, my question is, I guess, how do you all see that from both the perspective of like someone who's racialized as white, like me, approaching solidarity with these movements, but also your solidarity with the Palestinian movement and their choice in forms of resistance. So I hope that was kind of clear.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're getting at. I'm gonna try and answer. Okay, so I think, like, in my experience with Red Nation and when we would have actions or protests, if it wasn't involving, Indigenous struggles here in Turtle Island, like if we were organizing something that is more connected to international solidarity, we would highlight the demands made by other Palestinian organizations that were in communication with us. No matter what the demands were, we would, like, I don't want to say uplift, but we would support that unconditionally, because we understood that it's not up to us to say what Palestinians should be demanding, because it's kind of like, it's not our place. Our role is to support that in the forms that they are demanding. And so I think sometimes, on the flip side, when it's Indigenous people making demands or that are demanding to be respected or trying to exercise like their self-determination or sovereignty, then it becomes what you said, like where other people, like outside non-natives, will try to change it or make it nicer or make it more like appealing to the state, because they themselves are uncomfortable. They're like, well, land back, does that mean I have to give up my house? Like, yeah. So I think, I hope that answers your question. But I think like the best way to support is to just simply follow the demands made by oppressed and colonized people that you want to be supportive of.
Yeah, man, good question. I think part of it is, well, so, all right, this is like, fundamentally, I think it requires like a certain political humility, which I know is kind of obvious. So, but like, what does that, what does that mean? What does that look like? And that's, I think, the hard question. And I'll just say that, speaking from some experience, like, I was involved in this group called Black for Palestine, which is, Black folks, primarily Black Americans, but, some Black folks from elsewhere in the world who reside here now, doing Palestine solidarity. And one of the things that we would discuss that was really important is like what it, a number of us had been to Palestine, and the kind of I don't know, the kind of like turn that happens when, you know, in this place called the US, Black people are, you know, whatever. We've been told that we're what's wrong with this country for, you know, whatever, a few centuries. It's been a pretty rough few centuries, right? But then in Palestine, if you're a US citizen, then it's like, oh, we have access and privilege that our Palestinian relatives don't have. What does that mean? You know? Or, you know, I have a comrade involved in this group who is Ethiopian. And again, you know, comes from a marginalized community in Ethiopia, lives in this country in an immigrant family, in a Black family as a Black woman, right? And then went to Palestine and saw Ethiopian Jewish IDF soldiers at the checkpoint. And she was like, it's the first time I saw myself in the oppressor, right? And I think that it's like, it requires a kind of openness to recognizing what our position is and how it can actually shift in different contexts, right? Yeah, that requires some humility. I mean, I do a lot of learning from Jewish anti-Zionist comrades, you know what I mean, who have been in a community that it's been a pretty rough several thousand years, you know what I mean, like for folks who have roots in Europe as Jewish folks, and you know, a community that has survived a lot. And then in the context of Palestine solidarity, they have to sit back and do some listening, you know what I mean? They're actually not at the center of this story. That requires some real humility, you know, so I find myself doing a lot of learning, you know, with those comrades. Yeah, let me leave it there.
Thanks both for that. Thanks, Brian, for the question. It's an important question. And I think, yeah, I think I'm getting what you are coming from. And I guess a question to go, because I do think a lot of it is comfort. And we talked, we had a session with one of the founder of, or I think it was one of the founders of Jews for Right of Return, and talking about, you know, comfort, right? And that we're not supposed to be comfortable, and it's okay to not be comfortable. And so I was reminded when you both shared, and especially Kylie, when you talked about like land back, and does that mean I am losing? And so I guess, anyway, so my question around comfort, what you both shared is, so how can we engage with people who do not feel very comfortable following, let's situating it in Palestine, you know, saying that we're going to respond to and uplift calls from Palestinian civil society. And this is actually a very like actual thing, that experience that happened. Do we continue to engage with them because we don't want to completely lose some of the benefit of solidarity? Or do we draw that line of like, you know, you can't agree to this, so I can't be in this space, or I cannot work with you? And this is a very specific situation, and I feel very comfortable being very honest with you all. I handled it in a specific way. I'm curious what you know, you all think, because I do kind of in the back of the mind, I'm like, and this is something I talked a lot with Danya, but like, oh, but should we have, because at least, you know, we don't want to completely lose them either. And I feel like that's something you know, we all might struggle with. So what kind of, I don't know, any thoughts on that?
That's so real. No, that's so real. I think in TRN we've had many conversations similar to that, and having to make very difficult decisions and who we want to work with and where our boundaries are. I think TRN has given you know, people, different organizations, opportunities to talk about or like address like the issue just straight up. Like and I think sometimes it's kind of like, I think it just goes back to just asking yourselves what you're going to tolerate and not tolerate, because it's kind of like it's about like finding a balance of is the person or organization that you're working with, are they willing to hear you out and understand where you're coming from and why, you know, something is an issue. But then also like reciprocating that, are they willing to like reciprocate that treatment like towards your collective or like your struggle? I think that's where TRN finds our balance. And oftentimes people do get hostile, like they don't want to hear it. They think they're right. They want to tell like us how to handle our struggles and our goals. So I think if they're unwilling to like struggle with you through a difficult conversation, then it may not be worth having their support. To be honest.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I guess I'll go back to that point about like liberations happening. Like this isn't just like we're in, you know what I mean? This isn't like we're in the club of people who like Palestine. Like that's not why I'm here. Like I'm here because Palestine's gonna be free. You know what I mean? And like I only have so many days on this planet, and like they're gonna be used to get, you know what I mean? Like to doing my part to getting Palestine free. So I don't. That's not the. It's not like a. It's not a conversation for conversation's sake. Now that said, there's all kinds of relationships to a freedom struggle. You know, like I don't think that all of us have to be in deep relationship with everybody who wants to support a freedom struggle. So, you know what I mean? If people are, I mean, and again, this gets back to the question of like, what is solidarity anyway? If it's conditional, then it's not really. If it's like, oh, I support Black Lives Matter as long as you guys don't disrupt traffic, and it's like, okay, well, you don't really support. You know, I support Palestinians as long as they resist the way I want them to resist. And it's like, well, that's not solidarity. You know what I mean? So you can believe that that you support Black Lives Matter, and that's great. But yeah, you're not going to be invited to every single meeting I'm organizing. Do you know what I mean? Like you can, it's so, but I also think that if there's always an invitation to be in a more genuine solidarity, which I'll say is unconditional solidarity. So wherever you're at now, that's okay. There's always a path to, you know, a different kind of relationship. But no, we are not you know, required to be in close relationship with everybody who says they're on our side.
Yeah, thanks you both for that. I think that's helpful. I think sometimes we need that reminder that like it's okay to have terms and boundaries of what, you know, how we want people to engage with us. And it doesn't have to mean a complete end of relationship. It's kind of just a reshifting or recentering of that. So it's very helpful. I want to shift us into like some of your personal experiences with more specific experiences with solidarity in general, and then Palestinian solidarity. So, oh, sorry, Brian, I'm gonna read your comment and then I'll get us into the question. So Brian said, even I get so exasperated and tend to have firm lines and boundaries because I am not going to give my energy and time to vampires. I can only try to imagine what it would be like for someone in the marginalized group. I have through marginalized identity, so I experience it very little. Thanks, Brian, for sharing that. And Brian is always in those moments using some of the privileges that he has to support other folks. So thanks, Brian, for bringing this question up and comment up in general. So I want to shift us to specific examples of solidarity and then in general, and then with Palestine. And so to start off with general, if you both could share one of your favorite moments of a solidarity space or setting, and what made it memorable or powerful. I'm sure there are many, but if you could share one.
My favorite every time is debriefing. I love debriefing because I think sometimes we don't get the opportunity or grasp the opportunity to just like celebrate a victory or an accomplishment, a shared experience. Sometimes I feel like it's always like, okay, we did this, now it's on to the next, and then on to the next, and then on to the next. And then pretty soon you're like, oh wow, like that event was 5 months ago, like how did everybody feel about that? um, but we had a comrade visit us in Albuquerque. His name is Wael, and he came from Palestine, and he participated in our Indigenous Peoples Day March and Rally. And he came with us back to our office, and we all got to debrief after the event, and he shared with us like his experience, like that was his first time participating in Indigenous Peoples Day. So he was just telling us, that it was like just beautiful to be there, and to just be a part of like a movement. And then we shared a little bit of history about like Indigenous Peoples Day in Albuquerque. And it was just like a really good, like, I guess like intimate moment to just be honest with each other and share our different experiences. And then just, like what is settler colonialism? What does that look like in a border town? And then what are the similarities like in Palestine? So yeah, I would say for sure like debriefing is my favorite.
Man, there's so many. It is hard to it's hard to choose a little bit. But I feel like uh, let me go with this one. When I was in high school, like I think, yeah, probably anyway, there was this really amazing struggle in Puerto Rico actually against the US Navy, which, Puerto Rico is like formally a colony of the United States. And among other things, the US does all kinds of, has militarized the island in incredible ways, and tests all kinds of weapons there. And there's this really incredible revolt of people in a community where they were testing bombs that stood up to the Navy. And they won. They actually kicked the Navy out of this island that's called Vieques. That's like small island off of Puerto Rico. So anyway, I was in high school, and I really did. I knew a little bit about this, but was really inspired by it. Like saw it on the news, and I found out there was like this meeting at somebody's house, and I went to it, and like, it was in this kitchen. There were a bunch of people sitting around this table, and they were all like these middle-aged Puerto Rican folks. They were like including like the parents of my classmates. And like the person whose house it was, he started the conversation by saying, "It's so good to see you all again. It's been so long." And I realized like I was the new person in the room, but actually like these were revolutionaries who'd been at this for a long time and who hadn't been active with each other for a while. And then here they were again, doing this thing in like my little hometown, in relationship to this thing that was happening on the island. And then like this random like Black kid who's not Puerto Rican like showed up. But I was sort of invited to this space that was this kind of sacred space, frankly, you know what I mean? And yeah, it was kind of realizing that there's each of these struggles has a whole history and lineage that we step into. And when we're invited into that space and get to grow in it, I mean, it's just the greatest honor. So I've always been grateful to that. It was yeah, it was a life changer.
Yeah, thanks both for sharing that. I want to open it up to anyone else because I don't know. I think these are some like uplifting like things to hear. So if anyone else has moments of solidarity or if they've been in a space that has been powerful, memorable, and wants to share, I'll just give us a minute to think and share out if anyone wants to. Or comments or reflections in general to form some.
I guess I can go. The moment of like, I guess kind of to answer the question, would be for me that so I'm in Students for Justice in Palestine, at Rutgers, New Brunswick. And I guess my favorite moments of like solidarity are typically after our events when we all kind of sit together. And I don't know, I just get this like really nice, like peaceful and warm feeling just seeing everybody from all these like intersectional and marginalized groups getting together, and just having this passion and love for the same thing. It like motivates me to continue and pushing through with them. So I think it's like a really nice and powerful moment after our events.
Thanks, Samia, for sharing. And you all have a very strong SJP, like politically, and like the solidarity work that you already have is very impressive. So thanks for all the work that you do too. Anyone else have a moment that they want to share, reflect on? Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I think because of all the isolation that was going on during sort of peak pandemic, and how that's also kind of had a ripple effect. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but sort of a ripple effect on like, I don't know about anybody else, but I seem to be leaving the house less. You know, even 2 years beyond, because there's just things we can do without whatever. But anyway, so when those moments happen where I get to be in person with people, I mean, I go to a million Zoom meetings a week. I feel solidarity there. That's where all my organizing takes place. But in 2020, when I was at the rally and march that my that my students organized, after the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, that was uplifting. When we were at PAC to kick off the No Appetite thing, it was finally meeting people in person and being in a room with them and sharing oxygen with them. When I went to the AMP New Jersey conference a few weeks ago, and I met people that were only on screens, and I saw people from all different types of identities there. I saw the families there, like I saw children running around, like that was beautiful. And I got to meet a comrade that I hadn't, from DSA, that I only knew, on a screen. And I was also so uplifted by the fact that like there are so many people that are half my age. It wasn't just like, the typical folks or uncles or anything like that. Like it was, like, and I loved it. Also, when I spoke at the Nakba Day rally in Patterson, right before y'all did the rescheduled street fair, for the street naming, like the day or so before that, I was at the Nakba Day rally, and that too, right? Like it was in person, and it was in the fresh air, and there was such a great feeling of solidarity there. All the speakers from different backgrounds, families with kids waving the flags, and it was just like there's so few in-person moments, in the last couple of years for me, that those sorts of things just are invigorating and touching in a way that they didn't used to be before, right? Because they were more frequent, and in a way that the digital just can't match as much as I love the digital.
Yeah, Thanks for sharing that. I think the digital gives us convenience, but I feel like the theme of our conversation for solidarity has been like the personal connections and conversations. I really like thinking of the debriefing moments as like those moments of solidarity too. I was thinking of, just as everyone was talking, I never really thought of this as necessarily solidarity, but I was kind of reminded when you all were talking, my husband and I went to Puerto Rico for our honeymoon, and we like booked like, you know, just a tour with like a person who like picked us up and showed us around. And just like in the first, I think the first 30 minutes, like he wasn't fully, you know, he was giving us like the cliche, like American tour, but then my husband's Palestinian, and then he said Palestinian, and you could just tell like, he was like, wait, so we can talk about politics? And he was like, I know you guys are American, but, and he just completely like gave us the real history, and like, we're like, please feel free to like continue shitting on America or the United States, basically. And just that moment of like that personal connection, then he felt like, you know, he was able to, he was just venting, and I learned so much that I didn't know before. So I think the personal connections are really great. Ragda, I want to read, unless you want to read it out loud, I can read your comment in the chat.
Yeah, I'll read it. I said that the similarities between the Nakba and the Trail of Tears are a huge reminder of how similar the Palestinian and indigenous causes, and it pushes me to learn more about the indigenous cause and how I can be in solidarity with them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, and how we're not, in the same way that we're not taught about the Nakba, like we're not, you know, the way that you're taught about Trail of Tears in elementary school, I think, or middle school is just so wrong. And so seeing the ways that they're both taught about in the wrong way is also, yeah, brings them together. Thanks, Rania.
So I think for me, I want to say, kind of building on Brian's point, just the existence of PAC in many ways. Like growing up, obviously I was very passionate about Palestine, and but it was always kind of like an internal issue. Like it was my family, you know, it was, for the most part, it was a lot of like echo chamber stuff. And I think PAC for me really opened my opened my eyes and opened the doors for a lot more solidarity, and realizing that, you know, I remember, for example, the first time I met Kylie, like I remember kind of renewing my own commitment to Palestine through seeing her commitment to Palestine. And when we brought, it was Kylie and Demetrius in a panel, and I remember them saying like, we're not going to stop until Palestine's free. And I thought, if they say that, then I have to say like double, right? And it was just such an inspiring thing to see. And obviously, Corey, also all of your work and everything that we've been seeing. But I remember with Kylie and Demetrius was like a very pivotal moment for me, because I remember I got very emotional after that first class we had together. And I was just thinking, like, there are people who are literally don't have, like, I guess, direct ties to this struggle, but are willing to sacrifice everything for it. And that for me was enough to say that this is like bigger than all of us. And again, like Corey was saying from the beginning, is like liberation is going to happen. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it is going to happen, and we have to keep working towards it. And that for me has been the most humbling experience, just kind of creating these spaces and seeing the growth in solidarity work, and also within the Palestinian community, seeing the increase in confidence and the increase in identification as Palestinians with the struggle, understanding what that means and working towards it, working towards, you know, liberation for all. And, you know, I think it's been also very important to me that since we started PAC, like a constant conversation we've been having is that, you know, we can't talk about Palestine without missing or mentioning or fighting for or discussing the other liberation movements that have to happen. Because the reality is the only way we can achieve Palestinian liberation is, you know, through liberation of all oppressed people. So that's always been like a very humbling experience for me. And it's been amazing to see how many people we've had the, you know, an impact on to kind of create that bridge and that understanding. And it's also been, you know, very pivotal for me in my own personal growth and my understanding of social justice and my own solidarity with other struggles. And just one specific moment, even though it wasn't in person, was our first PAC our first virtual PAC conference, our second conference. I remember we had so many people from around the country coming, and even I think we had some people from around the world, and it was just so beautiful to see that a lot of people, like, just this space that's being created to talk about it, to uplift it, and the hope that everybody walked away with it. So thank you both for your solidarity. Echo Reem's comment earlier. Honestly, this is what keeps giving me hope. This is what personally keeps renewing me and renewing my intentions towards, liberation for all. So thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Brian?
Yeah, so along those lines of like the inevitability and the optimism and the hope and that sort of thing. I'm a history teacher, by day, right? And when I think about, and this reminds me of the forms of resistance thing, right? Like, so as terrible as history is taught in US schools, right? In 2023, right? Like, I don't get pushback that like Native Americans out in the West were justified in quote unquote attacking and raiding quote unquote like settlers, right? Like, I don't get pushback on that, right? You move forward a little bit in history, right? Get into the 60s, right? And you get into the Black liberation struggle, and then you get a little more divided, right? A little more like, oh, well, people start to fetishize the nonviolence part, right? And not, right? And then you get now to the, 2020s, because it's happening right around us, right? And when the Palestinian resistance opens fire on settlers, right? Then we're clutching the pearls, right? Like, right? And what I try to remind my students of sometimes is that, I guess, recency bias of like, when you're living through it, right? Think about like how we're going to think about this differently 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 years from now, right? Like, listen, capitalism is going to end. It might not happen in my lifetime, right? But it's my duty to push that forward, right? And so same thing, right? And not to like get too dramatic, right? But like, I'm sure there were times when, the abolitionists looked around and doubted, whether enslavement was going to end, right? And they were considered radical and that sort of thing. I mean, the American government called Mandela a terror, right? Like, we have to remember that like, history is going to look back on us well, like it did other things, because we're doing the right thing, right, for humanity. And that helps me get out of bed in the morning, so yeah. I don't know if that kind of made sense or not.
No, it did. Thanks, Brian, for sharing that. I love how everyone's been sharing. So I want to just, before I move us on, if anyone else has anything to share on this. And thank you, Kylie, for putting that in the chat. Indigenous Peoples History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. I remember seeing I think it was Howard Zinn had, it wasn't, I would just call it something like with a similar title, right? I think Howard Zinn had like a history, something like that. I remember seeing that on my dad's bedside table every night, and then I'm like, and then you wonder why I ended up with the politics that I did, but that just reminded me of that. Thanks everyone for sharing all those moments. I think it's important to hear those moments and like get the reminders of the good feelings of doing this work, especially in moments of just a lot. Everything feels like a lot. I think I want to take us to, so obviously you both and everyone here inspires us, and we inspire each other in doing this work and doing this work together. So I want to ask Kylie and Corey, what specifically related to Palestine, what inspired your work or continues to inspire your work, your Palestine solidarity work, or if you want to just, share people and things that inspire you in general too.
I think what inspires me is, oh gosh, where do I even start? I think honestly, when I joined the Red Nation, learning about Palestine, was like a required, it was part of our political education, to become a member. Like you had to understand like Palestine and the struggles and like history of resistance there. And I think, like again, I had no idea. I was just like, I don't even know where to start. But my comrade Melissa, she was the one who would just like talk me through it, or just like give her perspectives or what she learned. She talked about like what she learned on her delegation to Palestine, and she brought a lot of that knowledge back. And then she is also Dene. We're from the same nation, and she organized a flag drop. So she had sewed together a Palestinian flag along with like a Pueblo ante. And so it's huge, like it's a really huge flag. And she organized like a flag drop in Window, which is like the capital of Navajo Nation. It's also the center of governance. And that's where our tribal like council chambers are. It's where a lot of like our legislation is made. And historically, Navajo Nation like elected leaders have been in support of Israel. And so that to me was just like so powerful that she organized to drop like the Palestinian flag in Window. And I was just like, oh my God, like hell yeah, Melissa. Like and like it's not like nobody could see it, like you could see it. It was just, and it's just like in the face of these elected leaders. So I think even in a place that is isolated like the reservation, there's limited access to knowledge. It's considered like a food desert. There's just very limited resources. And so for Melissa to go to a place like the Res and just bring attention to like Palestinian resistance and make those connections, I think just like really like revamped, because there have been like historically Dene solidarity. And so I think like that was just kind of like another ripple. And so it caught the attention of youth who seek out information about Palestine, that want to learn more about Palestine. And there's a collective, they're called Info Shop. They're located in Window, and they also distribute information, pamphlets, workshops. And so it's just so beautiful to like see that effort like in my nation. Just knowing like how limited it is, but it's like yeah, it's like, because we know absolutely like through and through that our freedom is going to come with the freedom of Palestine. So I think that's kind of like, yeah, what just pushes me, because I see it growing within my own nation. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, I mentioned that well, one thing, I mean, learning about Palestine was the event that catalyzed my whole kind of coming into my worldview, you know what I mean? Like, is extremely important. And the thing that I think is especially powerful was, so I mentioned like I didn't know Palestinians for for all in my hometown. But I knew about Palestine because of Palestinian resistance, and that's the thing is like coming into solidarity with Palestinians meant and means not just being in solidarity with oppressed people, it's being in solidarity with resisting people. And it forced me to justify that orientation. You know what I mean? Because it was not popular for me to be aligned with Palestinians. And I had to justify it. And I'm grateful for that. You know what I mean? Like so it's really I mean there's a lot I could say. But that's the thing that I'm most grateful for. It grounded me in self-determination in the truest sense, I think. So I just feel tremendous gratitude to be part of this, to be in solidarity with this struggle.
I really like that phrasing, that it's about being solidarity with resisting people, because I think that also helps like undo this, victim narrative all the time, right? And that we're seen as people that other people need to help and save. But like, no, we are people resisting. And if you would like to join us, please do. Yeah. And thank you, Kylie, for sharing that too. I think you made me think of a lot of like really powerful and great women that I've seen do stuff. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like I want to be able to do that. So yeah, that's always a really great moment. Does anyone have questions on this or reflections or things they want to share before I take us to our last question? Or people that inspire them that they want to share with us? If we think of them, we can always come back to them. But I wanted to make sure we had time to focus on, so one of the last questions was advice that you had for, this is very timely, but advice that you had for people who want to engage in solidarity with Palestine or other resisting people, or people who are resisting but are afraid of, and rightfully so, right? The fear mongering is real, and so are afraid of some of the pushback or the consequences of engaging in this activism. And we know specifically for Palestine, things like Canary Mission exist, and people are worried about careers and being able to travel and things like that. So what are, if you have any pieces of advice that you can share with us on that aspect, or just in general of engaging in solidarity work?
I think my advice would be, and I'm sure all of you know this, but like, I mean, I think a good piece of advice that I always like receive is just don't give up. Keep going. Even when you are in doubt or you feel like you're not on the right track, I feel like those are signs that you're definitely are on the right track. If you are uncomfortable or you're just kind of like uncertain, I think in those moments it's always best to lean on your comrades, on your community. And I think if you are speaking the truth and you hold your ground in truth, it can't steer you wrong, especially if you have the support of your community. And I think just, yeah, grasp those moments, be courageous. I know it sounds really scary, but I think once you see it through, it's definitely worth it. And there may be other people who are looking to you, you know, like you're their example to be courageous. So that's kind of what I always think about too, is like, yeah, there's all the haters, but as long as there's like one person or a few people who understand what I'm saying, then I know I'm not alone. um, yeah, I hope that makes sense. It's kind of everywhere, but I feel like that's always something that my comrades and my close relatives remind me.
Yeah, I'll definitely second the piece on you know, drawing on the support of your comrades in your community. It's like we don't do this alone, right? We don't do any of it alone, including and especially, you know, facing the attacks. We survive it together. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's that point that, you know, whatever the purpose of, I think the true purpose of attacks like what Canary Mission does, or, you know, policing, is to make you feel isolated, to make you feel that you have to ask the question of whether or not or how you'll persist alone, as though it's only your question to ask. Obviously, we all, at the end of the day, like, you know, we have to like look ourselves in the mirror and think about what we want to do. But the whole point is actually like, we're not the only people who've ever faced repression. We're not the first people who've ever faced, you know what I mean? Like we're not the only people in the world who face repression. So there are other people facing, you know, similar things in this place right now. And of course, there are people all around the world facing all kinds of forms of repression, and all kinds of people who came before us. We're not, you know, I think that there's like a part of what's really difficult about just I don't know, our social movements right now, activist communities. Like I feel like we, and especially in this, again, in this place called the United States, I feel like we're like, we come up with these, we encounter these problems and we're like we're the first people in history who've ever encountered this problem. You know what I mean? It's like, no. Lots of people have worked through this. So one is it's possible, and two is it's like learning how are other people dealing with it? How have people dealt with it historically? How are people dealing with other challenges around the world? And taking a, you know, it's in no way to minimize, you know, the risk that people face, because it's real risks. And I also just think, you know, I like to put it in perspective as well. I mean, yeah, hearing about the news from Nablus, you know, I'm just like, you know, I know it doesn't feel like easy in the US right now, and there's all kinds of repressive stuff here happening, but I'm like, damn, my neighborhood wasn't invaded by an army today, you know what I mean? So like, okay, put things in perspective, right? And how can we use that space, you know, to do what we can. I guess the other thing I'll say, and this gets a little like, you know, it's a little bigger, but I'm just going to share it because I've been thinking about it a lot, actually, especially over the past few years, with the pandemic, with, you know, the brutality in Palestine, with, you know, the like repression against like water protectors, you know, and land protectors and defenders, like the policing against Black Lives Matter. It's just been thinking a lot about the question of survival, and an endurance. And just to say, like, the folks who are represented on this call, like, we've survived a lot. You know what I mean? Like I know it's not easy right now. And that's real. And I'm like, yo, like, people indigenous to the Americas, Black people, are you kidding me? Palestinian, like we're survivors. A lot has been invested to like end our communities. And like here we are, you know, and we're still figuring this out. So I think that there's some real there's some real depth that we draw on there, you know. Yeah, I think about the ancestors and all that they did and all that they did for us. And what's really amazing, bringing it back to solidarity, is man, like it's not just what like my ancestors did for me, like it's what your ancestors did for me. I like that, like the richness of the survival of Palestinian people, the richness in the survival of people indigenous to the Americas feeds me. Man, like we just how blessed are we? Like we have like the greatest inheritance in the world. So there's just a lot to draw on. And it's again thinking about the US and like when the pandemic started, they were like, you better hoard toilet paper or whatever. And I'm like, yo, that's not how my people survived. Not by hoarding toilet paper. That wasn't it. You know what I mean? We survived on something, we drew on something much, much deeper. And all of us have these incredible survival stories. So yeah, gratitude to the ancestors for digging deep wells for us to draw on. And then it's like, it's for us to draw on, you know, it's there for us, you know, and to figure out together today, how do we access that? How do we access all that richness? Because it's not over, we still got work to do.
That was beautiful. I feel like I just need to let that sit because I think the last couple of weeks and just in general have been tough. So hearing that is like a nice grounding. It's I think I need to hear it. I'm sure a lot of other folks need to hear it too. And just the like looking, you know, at the inner and then also just the community reliance is really important. And I'm hoping that we have been able to facilitate that, you know, that for all of us through this course, and that we have 2 more weeks, but hopefully after, like we can keep the WhatsApp group or whatever it is active, so that if someone does feel like they're in a situation and needs that support, they know that they can reach out to everyone that's been in these classes with them too. Those were all of the questions that I had prepared. I know that we covered a lot, so I'm just going to give us a minute to think and reflect if there are any last minute questions or comments or reflections to share with our speakers before we end today. And Ronnie, go ahead.
I mean, I just wanted to say thank you. I think what Abir said was this was very needed. And I think it, you know, ending this conversation fills me with hope and a clear vision of the future. And just, I always love having you two with us. So thank you so much. And we hope to continue to grow in community. And hopefully we can gather together in a free Palestine.
That would be very nice. Yeah, thank you both so much. I know there's been a lot of thanks and gratitude in the comments already, but if you ask them all, I was like, last week I was telling them how excited I was for this conversation, and I wasn't even worried that it wouldn't meet the expectations, and it definitely did and beyond. So thank you so much. I think just the comfort of it and just the discussion is always really helpful. So thank you for giving us your time. I know it's a little late too, but like Rania said, hopefully we can continue having more conversations like this. For everyone, I know Rania put it in the chat, but we do have a conference coming up also between March 17 and 19 that hopefully is going to have a lot, is the theme is to center Palestinian voices and visions. And so hopefully we can continue these conversations with a lot of Palestinians on the ground that will be joining us for the conference. But Kylie and Corey, thank you again so much. If there's any last things that you all want to say before we end, please.
Just yeah, thank you all. I really enjoyed being on this panel. Corey, it was nice to be in conversation with you. Yeah, and I'm just like so thankful to be here and to have the invitation.
Yeah, I'll echo the gratitude to you, Kylie, you know, sharing your wisdom, and yeah, Aviator for, you know, facilitating a beautiful conversation, to really to all of you. And yeah, I was just thinking, like, thinking about this question of survival, like there was this when I was earlier, whatever, in my time when I was getting into like learning about Palestine, there's this guy named Ariel Sharon, this Israeli like career military dude turned politician. You know what I mean? Like his like personal goal in life was to like eliminate Palestinians, like militarily and then politically. Like he's gone, like he died and Palestine lives. Do you know what I mean? Like Palestine, like they can't beat you. They just can't. So yeah, I don't know. Shout out to Palestine. just like the you know, just a resisting, surviving people that honestly show us all the way. So just big gratitude to be in conversation with you all.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect way to end, is a shout out to Palestine and to all of us and our ancestors and people who have given us strength and taught us how to survive. Thanks everyone. Thank you all for this really great conversation. I really enjoyed it and appreciated everyone's input. And yeah, hopefully this is the first of, or not the first, but one of many more that will continue happening. So thanks everyone. Have a great night.